I'm here with John Fox, VP of Product and Global Partnerships at Indeed, who is going to discuss how recruiters can use Indeed Connect to build their employer brand and hire faster with AI-powered precision. John, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on the show, Dan. Great to be here.
Indeed Connect promises to help employers stand out, source faster, and hire smarter. Which of these benefits do your current customers find most valuable and why?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think ultimately it comes down to the specific employer and what they're looking for. We've seen some employers like really care about all of it, some hone in on specific areas. But maybe just to share a few specific examples here. For Indeed Apply, Sync Jobs, right, which is the kind of technology behind a lot of what we're doing with Indeed Connect. We see overall those jobs on average 13% fewer days to fill, right? So they do fill faster. And then from a branding perspective, if we think about what we've done with our friends over at Glassdoor plus Indeed from a branding side of things, we're seeing cost per apply starts on those jobs are about 49% lower. Right. So that really just speaks to the importance of an employer brand and the importance of being able to stand out.
Why did Indeed decide to add features like a full search engine results page takeover and competitor ad suppression?
Yeah, so Dan, we've had employers ask us for these types of features for a really long time. Starting, as we've been working really closely with Glassdoor over the past couple of years, we've partnered together on a bunch of new brand developments. I think one of the latest was Spotlight pages, where you could actually highlight specific divisions within a company. And so really like we view these as kind of our next iteration of, specific brand capabilities. I think in addition to that, we know like brand searches are just incredibly popular. But job seekers don't always know like what are the brands that are hiring near them. And we really think this experience really helps to allow us to, help those job seekers discover really what are more relevant options there. Perhaps when they may not know exactly who's hiring right next to them as well.
Yeah, when I think of employer brand, I think of like, small versus large companies and large companies. I mean, at least from a consumer perspective, we know a lot of them stand for, and that translates to their employer brand as well. But what about the smaller companies? Like, does this help them better position themselves relative to their larger peers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly can. And certainly when we think about brand overall, one of the most important components when a job seeker is making a decision, if they want to apply or do they want to work at this company, is to understand like what is that company like to work at? And so I think this is both helping that employer get their name out there to understand, hey, like this is an option or this company is an option for this job seeker, but then also help tell the story of why your company's great, right? And every company starts out small and then, some of them, scale in size. But there's so many small business employers, across the world, and it's
Way more
important to
than
help.
large companies, right?
Exactly. So it's so important to help job seekers, get
That's
some
how
more.
I've always thought about employer branding is you're lowering the experience gap of not working somewhere and working somewhere and like closing that in, really understanding what you're in for. So you don't start and be like, this is actually not for me because that's bad for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way to put it.
What type of ROI should a company expect from this premium service compared to Indeed's standard offerings?
Yeah, so I think we're still early days here, right? This is a pretty new product that we just announced last week at the FutureWorks conference. But I think overall, what we're seeing in our early testing is we estimate about a 20% potential cost savings. We're thinking about 58 plus hours saved per hire, and about 18% saved in time to hire. And so certainly like we would expect there's going to be a spectrum there and anticipate there'll be, some differences that we'll learn as we get more and more volume here. But I think, those are pretty compelling numbers, I think, and it will be great to continue to learn and scale this with employers.
What are some of the most exciting AI pilots on the horizon that you believe will have the greatest impact on how companies hire?
Yeah, so as I think about it, the things that, to me are most interesting are experiences that can touch both sides of the hiring marketplace, right? If I think about the employer side of things, I want things that help cut through the busy work and help me like be able to spend time with the candidates and help sell them on why they should join my company. And then also on the job seeker side, just like help the process go faster, right? Hiring still takes too long. And so I think really two of the products that we announced that are part of this Indeed Connect package to me, I think are most exciting. You've got advanced sourcing, which is really, working as an extension of your recruiting or your sourcing team, really helping you to kind of identify and source those candidates for those critical roles. And then you're able to, tell the employer can tell the product like in natural language, specifically what does that ideal candidate look like? What's the outreach content, the outreach tone that you want them to use? And then that employer is able to monitor in real time, and jump in, make changes, based on the candidates that they're seeing come in, right? And all of those interested and qualified candidates are delivered right back to your ATS. And so, like on the flip side, on the job seeker side of this, it's really exciting because you have this very responsive AI recruiter that you're able to ask questions to specifically about that job or specifically about that company. And then similarly, the other kind of AI solution we launched here was advanced screening, which I think is similar. So if you think about the hundreds of applicants you might get for specific jobs, you need to evaluate, who is the right fit for that specific role. And so we're able to screen those candidates based on the employer's specific criteria. We can automate the next steps, whether that's like driving to, next step messaging or interview scheduling and so forth. And we leave the hiring decision for the employer, but really try to get at some of that kind of more nuanced candidate information that you might need, to really understand who's the best fit for your job.
Because Indeed has all these data points that makes it more unique than just using a chat GPT or some general platform. It's you have all of these data points of all the different jobs and employers that use and publish. And so you're able to better equip these job seekers with information, but also employers in terms of what might make the most sense for them. Can you provide an example of how advanced screening could work and use some of this criteria and data points?
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing that's really interesting here is, so if we think about the specific data points that we can use in making these recommendations, on one side of it, we understand here's the job description, but like how often are there like additional criteria that an employer really wants? And then also on the well, so let's dig into that one maybe a little bit. Say for instance, I'm given a job description, but when I start talking to that employer, they say, "Hey, I want someone who, can step in, help deliver on a project that's behind schedule." Or I want a candidate that has evidence of career growth, in their, or sorry, career growth, and also someone that's managed, say client-facing projects. And I want someone who is going to be on site most of the days, right? Those are things that aren't going to be in the job description usually, or maybe some of them, but maybe not in that same way. And then it's probably not going to be in the job seeker's resume. And so what I think is interesting is as we think about, how we deliver these capabilities, we're going to start training these agents specifically for that employer and specifically what they're looking for. But a lot of these need kind of a day one capability, right? If you're an employer coming in, you haven't used this product before. So we're able to use all of our data to help train that agent in what we think is probably the right fit for that job in that specific region, et cetera, so that you have a great experience day one. And then you're able to layer on your employer specific criteria on top of there. So, I would expect you're going to see pretty valuable insights right out of the gate. And then the more you leverage it, the better and more tuned to your specific employer experience it will become.
And how do you measure and report on the precision of your AI-powered tools to your clients?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this comes down to company specifics, right? Ultimately, we want to see what are the outcomes that come from that job. So, did they end up getting hired? Did the employer end up interviewing that candidate? And so, we're both in touch with the employer to understand those things. But we also have integrations with hundreds of ATSs specifically for disposition data, right? So we can both leverage that what we understand in that specific interaction with the employer, but then we can also see, hey, in your previous jobs, here are the types of profiles that you've actually hired for. Right. And, I just think about like people I hire on my own team and the conversations I've had over the years with my recruiters. It's often been like, John, your job description says this, but you tend to, like these other things too, these other attributes. And so that's always helpful to just to validate and also just to recognize, hey, am I being too strict perhaps in my initial screening for that job too? So I think it's oftentimes really helpful just to see that data and have those kind of downstream connections.
Absolutely. And all those data points can really help me make informed decisions. How does
Right.
the ATS integration change the day-to-day workflow for a recruiter? And what are the biggest challenges you've faced in making these integrations truly seamless?
Yeah. So I think one of the most exciting things here is if you have Indeed Apply turned on, which many, many employers over the years have turned this on, there's zero extra work for you to do. So just like right out of the gate, there's not a, 12-month implementation process or something like that. Like you're able to leverage this the moment that Indeed Apply is turned on for you. Um, and so, and if I think about it, it's not just beneficial because we're able to, integrate with the ATS, but also Indeed Apply has, some of those additional values we talked about before, 2.4 times more likely to lead to a hire. Certainly they close about 13 days faster. So there's a lot of those great job seeker benefits there too. Um, and then basically what you'd see both for, advanced sourcing and for advanced screening is those applicants are delivered directly to your ATS in both of those situations. Um, the place where, we had talked about before around kind of that additional configuration, right? So whether it's on sourcing or screening, be able to share that additional context of your company or what you're looking for this specific role. Those screens for like where you would engage with those agents would either be found on Indeed, leveraging Indeed Talent Scout, or there's some of those ATSs that we recently announced. We have Talent Scout natively installed in. You'd then be in that ATS specifically, entering those criteria. So that's really the one thing that differs based on what ATS you have. But I think we're at about 350 ATSs globally now that have Indeed Apply. And so all of those are able to leverage these capabilities. And I would assume that those Talent Scout capabilities will continue to expand as well.
The ones that are fully integrated with the ATS, do you find that they have a better success rate? Or is it still too early to really kind of understand those that have the integration versus not?
Well, so really the baseline prerequisite is like we must have an Indeed Apply integration. So, pretty much everyone that's leveraging advanced screening or advanced sourcing is leveraging that integration. Now, I think certainly some of the additional benefits of having Talent Scout right there in your ATS, we're certainly seeing, I think, some really interesting insights there. But it's probably too early to tell if there's, like how that's going to differ just from like a workflow perspective
Yeah.
even versus someone coming on to Indeed to, kind of specify what they're looking for. But I think it'll be great, kind of a great learning experience with employers to understand what works for them. I think anytime you launch, interesting new products like this, there's always a lot of great feedback that comes from employers. And so I think we'll continue to
And
um,
recruiters are very vocal about it. That's for
of
sure.
course, yeah, and like we want to make them, more effective, more efficient at their jobs, and help them, through these hiring processes. And so, we certainly want to listen and, iterate as quickly as we can based on their feedback too.
The advanced sourcing pilot delivers qualified candidates with validated interest. Can you elaborate on how interest is validated by the AI before a candidate is delivered to a company's ATS?
Yeah, certainly. So, and this probably won't be, too surprising, but kind of what we found there's kind of two things that are most effective in just understanding if a job seeker is interested and kind of reducing no-shows. The first is just, as they're applying in a conversational environment, just confirming, are you interested and are you available to interview? And then I think with that, just adding in some back and forth communication before they apply. It's those things that kind of make that application perhaps different. And it's not just like clicking a few buttons and going through the flow, but like you're actually engaging. You're answering some of those clarifying questions. And I think pretty much we see if an employer, if a job seeker is engaging in that way, they are highly likely to continue through the process, and we should see the no-shows drop off quite a bit.
And that's really important in today's ghosting world. And with people, there's been a lot written about it as you've seen about people
Yeah.
just using AI to craft resumes, cover letters, and just spam employers like crazy. So to have those filters and in place that like must, yield better candidates and kind of deter people from just applying for the sake of applying. Because you're going to get that more,
Yeah.
especially in a time when the economy is not as good as, it was like, let's say last year or so. You're going to get a lot more people being desperate or trying to use AI to kind of amplify the amount of resumes and cover letters and just overall applications they push out. So the filtering, I
Yeah,
think, is valuable.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and this is also where I think Career Scout is really interesting as well, right? Which is one of the other new products we announced last week, just the ability for a job seeker to really understand like where are they a best fit, like based on your skill sets, what are the specific types of jobs they might be a good fit for, and so to really try to help them both be very targeted with their outreach, but potentially also open up new avenues that they hadn't thought about before. And so, hopefully all of these tools we've released are kind of working together just to, you know, help the marketplace work better overall, both on the job seeker and the employer side.
In what ways does Indeed Connect leverage the vast amount of data from job seeker profiles to provide unique advantage over other sourcing platforms?
Yeah. So, if we take a step back and if we think about, for instance, like in the US, we reach 96% of all online job seekers. Um, and the data that we collect is all about jobs, right? There's nothing else around social media or politics or games or any of those things, right? It's like we're like so specifically focused on jobs and for the job seekers, like their, specific capabilities. And so, like, we use that data in a few ways. And really, what's most important is matching, right? And we really care about how can we drive those connections between job seekers and employers. For the job seeker side, we really want to understand like what are their goals, what are their skills, their licenses, their certifications, their salary targets, what's their location preferences, like all those specific things, right? I think are really important for us. And certainly, as I was just talking about Career Scout earlier there too, right? That can help a job seeker, refine those and help us understand as we're thinking about matching. And then on the employer side, right, it's beyond the job description, as we talked about a little bit before, right? It's like what are the specific skills, the locations, the compensation, what are those extra things that might not show up in the job description. And so really as we think about Talent Scout and we think about some of the advanced sourcing and screening, right, it's like how do we pull all that data together and really understand the detail behind what the job seeker really wants and what the employer really wants. And then we bring those together with matching. And I think ultimately we continue to improve on this, and I think matching will always be something for continual improvement. But I think, most recently, like we've seen 81% of employers agree that Indeed is helping them attract and hire qualified talent with those confirmed skills. And so I think it's at least saying, hey, I think we're on the right track. I think we're, continuing to improve there and to provide, great quality matches on both sides of the marketplace.
The end of the day, it's all about matching, right? And that's why you have to look to, at features that benefit the job seeker as well as the recruiter, because that's how everyone can come together using data and technology and AI, as a platform and mechanism. How does Indeed provide insights and recommendations on improving outreach strategies based on all this data?
Yeah. So like specifically as we think about outreach, like we do a lot of it, right? Both as Indeed itself to job seekers recommending specific jobs, but then also employers outreaching specifically too. And so like we're able to leverage all of that, identify the interaction, um, and then based on like that whole data set, we can then tune those outreach strategies, right? So we can think about what's the right timing, what's the right content, um, you know, and so like being able to take a lot of those different components, and I think like we're uniquely positioned in the market to have that ability and have that insight, across the board. And so we really try to think about for that specific job seeker, for that specific employer, and for that job, like how do we um, both both how do we match the best, but then also we might find a good match, but we still have to create that connection, right? And so like we're also constantly thinking about how can we make that make that better, and how can we, get the best preferences from the job seekers and the employers on how they want to engage there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights, John. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, Dan.